I'm not sure whether I'm an architect, but for sure that my name is Wolf Prix. I was born 1942, long time ago actually, almost 80. I was born 42 in Vienna and brought up in a little medieval city 40 miles outside of Vienna, going east. And this medieval city was a famous city because when the Turks come to Austria in 1563, this little town could hold them for 3 days, and that was time enough to get a Polish army from Poland to Vienna in order to help to defend Vienna against the Turkish army. So, and the funny thing is that I hang on the theory that the visual experience in the youth or in the childhood are kind of imprinted in your memory. So the first drawings I did, I remember, was about the thick walls and the doors which are enclosing the medieval city, and the palace, the castle on top of the hill. So the heavy architecture was the first topic I was fantasizing in drawing the things. But thanks God, this medieval city is also placed on a river, on the river Danube. So the visual experience was not only the heavy metal architecture, but also the flowing of the streaming of the river, which it was very dangerous to swim through, and we have to learn how to handle these turbulences. If you want to cross the river, you have to swim through a kind of wild Danube with a lot of turbulences, and you have to learn as a young kid that you don't have to fight the turbulences, but that you have to dive through the turbulences in order to get out without swallowing too much water. So these 2 points, the turbulences and the flowing of the river, and the other side, the heavy buildings, were influencing my first idea of architecture. By the way, my father was an architect, so I was very early in touch with this kind of profession, building things. So I was doing a lot of little models out of matches in order to build castles or factories, because next to this city there was a Steinberuf, a quarry, and the machinery and the dynamic rolling bands, and the diagonal structures were also influencing me. All 3 things come together in my first model I did in the when I was 6 years or 7 years. I didn't know that I should be an architect, but because I was working in my father's office, let's say it was a common agreement between him and me that I will study architecture after doing the high school. And I figured out that at different times, the topics of these three influences came out very, very strong. In the first project I did for the technical university, I was really dealing with heavy stone-aged architectural pieces, but then I went to the factory and quarry technical machineries, also influenced by archigram, and I was fascinated by Peter Cook and Ron Heron, The Walking City, and Dennis Crompton, The Computer City. I was really influenced, and we tried to mix that with Michael Webb. Michael Webb was a hero. The Sin Palace was a model I studied very carefully. And later, when we started to think about architecture in a real sense, we were three friends working together. I was going for the architecture of insects. They were influenced by the insects, by the shapes and forms of bones and insects and the head of the insects and things like that. Because what we said at this time, if you only think in architectural terms, only architecture will come out. So we tried to put all the things which were outside of the field of architecture, like racing cars or the space shuttle or the space suit. All these things were much more influential on our way of thinking than, let's say, Greek architecture or Baroque or all this, or the economic way of thinking of the 7.50 meter grid. That we pushed that all away and said, okay, we want to make architecture free of these constraints in order to liberate space. At this time, when I started architecture, I was working in an office close to France in Germany, and I was visiting Corbusier. And that fits a little bit to my intention of this old medieval building, yeah. But the new interpretation came out. This is what I meant when I talked about the first years of architecture were very influenced by Corbusier. Later on, Kiesler was my role model, and a year later, Piranesi came into my mind. But when people asked me 10 years later, did you have any architectural role model? Did you have a role model? I said, no, I only have one role model. That's Keith Richards of the Rolling Stones, because I like his guitar playing, creating tension, and creating the desire to move ahead. This was, and then we decided to do Himmelblau as a team, We were three guys. It was Helmut Zwiczynski, Michael Holzer, and myself. And we were thinking about giving us a name like the Rolling Stones, a team name, or the Beatles, or the Cream, because we wanted to be rich and famous like these guys. If I'm looking back, I must say this is a mistake, because as an architect, you never will get that comfortable rich like the rock stars get the money. Anyway, so we were thinking about that. And when Helmut and me have been on a holiday trip to Spain in order to study the bullfighting technique. And when we came back, we said, okay, how should we, the name Prix, Holzer, Zwiczynski, or Zwiczynski, Holzer, Prix? No way, this was boring. And we said, okay, a team name like the Stones or Beatles. And we were sitting in an airplane, and I saw this out of the window, a cloud seemingly hanging on the wing of the airplane, and the background was this wonderful blue heaven. So we said, okay, we always wanted to build clouds. And remember, maybe you know this piece in Shakespeare's Hamlet, when Hamlet was talking to Polonius about a cloud. Look at this cloud, it looks like a camel. And Polonius said, yes, my prince. No, it changed into a crocodile. So this change in vocabulary was very interesting for me. And I didn't think cloud is not a good team name. And it's too simple to explain what we want. But we wanted to be more complex, meaning more complicated to understand that. Well, so we said, okay, why don't we call ourselves Himmelblau, sky blue? And since we are a team, and since we wanted to build, we said building cooperative Himmelblau. But it turns out it was too long, so we said cooperative Himmelblau. So Coop Himmelb is the name. And when we started to build it in the 80s, then I released, or I pushed the L out of the Himmelblau, pushed it out in parentheses, and that changed the name from the color sky blue into the meaning of building the sky. Himmelbau means sky builders or sky building. And since then it's Coop Himmelb. The greatest compliment in this level I got from my son years later when we did the rooftop. He played guitar like me, so I gave him all my guitars, and he played in 1 year 10 times better than I was playing. So I gave up, and he started to do his musical career. He's now playing guitar and composing, and he is also sound designer for exhibitions. Anyway, so he was working in our office, and when he saw the picture of the rooftop, and he said, "Do you know that this image reminds me on on the solo of Keith Richard in the song Give Me Shelter. This was the greatest compliment I ever got, because why Keith is so implemented in my the Rolling Stones and Keith, because he is he's not the lead guitar, but he is leading the tension producing band of the Rolling Stones. And I like this tension because we, as architects building buildings, we have to deal with gravity and tension a lot. So therefore, we're studying this tension building melody of Keith, and the Rolling Stones were the first anti-authoritarian band in the pop culture, against all rules and regulation. They built up their career against all odds, and because they never followed the mainstream. They were always a little bit ahead of the mainstream. This is a good recipe, like Bob Dylan, the same thing. Yeah. So this is what I talk to my students, when I was teaching. I don't teach anymore regularly. I'm talking to them and I find out what else outside the field of architecture is interesting for you. If you are too fixed to the rules and regulation, you are not able to push in the envelope or crossing a borderline. Now the younger kids are trying to do that with the computer, not knowing that the computer takes the architect as a slave, producing shapes, forms. AI is a little bit different, but if you don't, you have to be very carefully. You have to be very carefully to control what the machinery is telling you should do. Understandable? So therefore, our method now is combining the analog way of thinking with the digital tools we can use, and which makes us faster to make decisions in the analog world. So that means that we're still drawing the first sketch. We are doing physical models, and then we put it in the 3D program of the computer, and then we print it, and we print it, and then we work on this printed model and change it by hand. So the analog way of thinking is still in the same level like the digital programs enable to do us forms we can never do by hand, like how is a wind deforming a building. And that makes a lot of difference in how you make the balconies or other extreme rooms coming out. You have to protect the inhabitants from this strong wind and so forth. So there's a lot of point of departures to create reasonable new shapes, which are nevertheless, because before us never could do that on the computer, and you cannot draw that by hand, how a wind is deforming a material. You cannot draw that. You have to use the machine, and that gives you a curve, and you can take this curve and use it to play around even on the ground plan. So this is how we are working nowadays. And since 2 years, we are working with the AI as well, but we don't call it artificial intelligence, we call it architectural intelligence. And as far we are close to the next step, that the AI can produce functional and reasonable ground plans. Learn, because we have all our ground plans in the memory and all our shapes in the memory. So now the AI, the co-worker Carl, we call it Carl, as a Charlie. Now he learns to combine that in a reasonable architectural, buildable way. This is how we are working now. And the next step is that the project will be produced totally by Charlie. But right now we're doing a competition where we use the AI intensely for deciding the whole theater. It's very interesting. If you only think in the conventional architectural terms, only architecture comes out, which is boring. If you don't fill it up with new qualities in terms of storytelling, in terms of experience, in terms of excitement. I always wanted to step in my head. I have the imagination of whatever that is. Yeah, I wouldn't say that the cloud is an architectural piece. 1968, where movable platforms create spaces, differentiated spaces for experience on another level than just have the light on or out. And I always wanted to prove whether I'm right. So, and my father was an architect. I knew exactly how to do that because I worked in his office since I was 10. And I learned a lot, I have to say. They could draw, these architects could draw with the pen, without scale. If they want to draw a line, 2 lines, distance 2 centimeters, they could do it without the scale, only freehand. They could do it. And when I was young, my father was drawing details 1 to 1. I was measuring this. And it was definitely not 2.3 centimeters, it was 2 centimeters. And he knew exactly this is 15 centimeters. So they were craftsmen in this way. Because of the industrialization, it's not necessary that you can draw a window by yourself, like we did in the office. The frame of the window, wood for the carpenter. It's not necessary nowadays. So we have a lot of freedom to think about other things than just about, this was a discussion about details. But I know if I have a wall, this was the discussion, and I have the grid, the 3-dimensional grid, Peter Eisenman's grid, simulating that's all over the building, and it stops before the wall and starts here, then the wall is stronger than the grid. You have to drill it through in order to give the whole meaning sense. And this is what we learned, or what I learned from Corbusier and from my father's office. Yeah, that's true. And you know that Tom, to say something about Tom, he is the best drawer and graphic designer of our generation. No one can draw that beautiful and lay out these things that beautiful like Tom. He has a real good eye. I think he's the best. Long story. We got a commission to do a house in California. Is a long story. Yeah. From a psychoanalyst who came from Vienna to San Francisco, and he said, please do a house like you want to do a house. I'm very interested in your method, using the subconscious as a design tool, which means that we are the real deconstructivist guy, is a theory. And this is the house I drew with eyes closed, and the model a small model, we enlarged it up to the scale from almost 1:1, and but it was I checked the site in Malibu, a little bit outside of the Malibu. The client bought the land, but he unfortunately died, and it was never built. Anyway, so yeah. So this was the first touch with LA. So I was there, and I met Tom. Actually, Saha told me, if you are going to LA, please visit the Morphosis, Tom Main and Eric Moss. And I went there, and they said, hey, Tom, it's me. And I remember exactly when he came in this small office on the Stoner Avenue of Morphosis. It was early 80s. I had to bow down in order to go through the door. And he had the book, Architecture is Now, our first book. And we were talking about drawings. And since then, good friend, Tom Main, good friend, and Eric, good friend, and Rotundi. And then I was looking for a machine which could enables us to check a model into the computer by a space arm. I saw a brochure in 1982 where it was this author was describing a studio in LA who is able to copy sculptures one-to-one by using the space arm and putting all the points in the 3D program of the computer, blah, blah, and then it milled it. And this is what I was wanted to have. So I went to Frank. Frank Gehry said, okay, this is the next door here. You can buy a space arm there. We started the same time when Frank was doing it, to copy, to trying to put our models into the 3D program. And the first building we did like that was the Groninger Museum, where we had an office in LA, and Caroline was working on this project. It was a model, crazy model, and we really built this model one-to-one. And it was a great experience. And since then, in Europe, it was America, the United States, and the schools were very interested in this procedure. Not so in Europe. So I had to buy the space in LA to bring it to Vienna. And you asking me, there is a lot of connection. Of course, there's a lot of connection, because a lot of people, before the Second World War, a lot of people from Vienna and from Austria was escaping to LA. And therefore, it's a little bit a curious feeling, yeah. Because when I came to LA, I felt at home. But later on, I discovered that there is a lot of differences. But if what is in LA +5 is in Vienna -5, but they are connected, but not the same way. Yeah? So this was a great time in LA, and I got a lot of friends. I was teaching there, and so the high point was when we were invited to take part on the deconstructivist show. And the funny thing on this deconstructivist show was when people saw the model of the rooftop, they said, you will never be able to build it. And because, rules and regulation, you would never be able to build it here, so you cannot build it in Europe. And I was laughing because at this time the construction was ongoing in Vienna. Was funny. And then I discovered that by studying this concept of deconstructivism, I found out that Derrida was a student of Freud. And nothing is closer to the Viennese than Sigmund Freud. And Freud's obsession of the unconsciousness, I could read in the theory of the deconstructivism written by Derrida. So the house which I was drawing with eyes closed, using the hand as a seismograph of the feeling, of the subconscious feeling of the upcoming building. This was very deconstructivist. And so therefore I said the rooftop was, I think, the first, or one of the first, I think it was the first deconstructivist architecture built. It was the question how we can change architecture. Yeah, how we can change or enrich the vocabulary of architecture by using other methods than just the grid or the ground plan and section. We always said plan and section and detail are the same. You have to turn it around, and then you see from the similarity of the section and the plan, or the detail and the ground plan and things like that. This was a theory, and the top of the theory was when I closed the eyes. I didn't see what I was drawing. So I used the hand I was feeling the house, so to say. I was feeling the inside and the outside of the house by closing the eyes, not seeing the architecture, but the feeling. I try to sketch the atmosphere. Yeah. So this, the hand was the seismograph of the atmosphere of the upcoming building, and then we said, okay, we say ground plan is section, so we plan is section. So we translated this drawing into a three-dimensional physical model, and this was the point of departure, to construct the whole thing in terms of architectural terms and in terms of gravity or non-gravity. In this house, there is no one column. The columns are tension rods, more or less, because column is for me always a symbol of pressure. Yeah. And for me, the ongoing quote, the Danube River is floating, flying, liquid like water. And the funny thing is a lot of experience we made with this house in terms of tension and suppression in architecture, because the whole house is only fixed to the ground, which is not the ground, it was a builded wall fixed on one point. All the other fixtures are tension rods stabilizing this volume, which we never designed from the inside, because we said when it's half finished, when it's finished, and the skin is ready, the client should move in and he should decide where he wants to live and where he wants to read, and where he should look at this inside like he looks to a landscape. Yeah. So this is a mountain, this is sea, this is whatever, forest. So his fantasy was a point of should be a point of departure of the development of the inside design, so to say. The last drawing I did was a drawing with a pen. Was the sketch for the tattoo I have on my right shoulder. It was the last drawing with a pen, with lead. From this point on, I only draw with ink or with other tools. Never ever with pens. It was not the drawing, this sketch drawing was translated into a model, physical model. And how to do that, to get this physical model into plans. We measured the model with a steel scale, scale, So this point is 5 centimeters, and so forth. We measured it. And then I saw this magazine where people in LA did it with the space arm. So let's have it. And from there on, we trained ourselves to use it as a tool for making the 3D model, physical model, into a plan via a digital tool computer. So and then it goes step by step. That the scan of the model came up. We have a 3D scanner came up. The model was scanned, put into the computer, printed, and then we worked on this printed model. We cut away and we did it bigger, we repeat it in a bigger 3D physical model, and so forth. Always trying to implement, to give the accident a chance. Because this is the other theory. How does at the black point on the wing of a butterfly, beautiful, red wing and white, and in the middle of the white there's a black point. How does that work? Is it calculated? Is it mathematically improved? No, it's evolutionary, came up that one of these butterflies get this black point and was not eaten by a bird because the bird was frightened by the two black points because this could be a cat or whatever. So this is evolutionary. It's not revolutionary, but it's very reasonable. And this is what we always say, accident is a very, very important fact in our design process. And that is the connection to Popper's, Karl Popper, The Open Society and Its Enemies. A very important, for us, a very important book. Yeah, that the autocratic system is anti-democratic. The autocratic system is anti-democratic. And at this time, 1968, we were young, we were really anti-authoritarian, because autocrats always suppress the freedom of expression. And we were really against that. When we say we want to liberate space from the seemingly hard constraints of codes and rules and taste, all the things, in the moment of designing, maybe I should say that in order to explain this motivation. In the moment of deciding, we said we have to get rid of all these constraints, otherwise you are drawing a line and say, oh, this will not be allowed by the fire code. To get rid of that means to liberate the space, and then you have to develop not the detail, but a strategy how to convince the fire police that this is better working than this conventional detail. This is what we did when we started to do architecture. This is what I'm teaching, actually. If you think in obedience, in the status of obedient in advance, you are dead. Meaning, will this the client like, or will this the city planning architect estimate? Then you are lost. You have to convince the client, you have to convince the city planning architect that this is the better move than just to make a block here. It's the better move to open the block up, to open it, that people can walk through, and so forth, and so forth. Has this and this advantage. So nowadays, it's also the same with the climate. Everyone is talking about climate saving, energy saving systems. I'm talking about energy producing systems. Not smaller than life, bigger than life. The energy saving systems bring us to thick walls with small windows like the medieval towers for defense. Stupid. And this is actually the danger in this conservative theory. over the classical that your president, not your president, the United States president, asking for classicistic style for government buildings. You know where the classicism is coming from? It's a copy, it's a rip-off of the Renaissance, which is a rip-off of the Roman culture. The Roman society was a military trading culture, making money by selling things, trading. And military. If you don't buy it from me, I conquer you, and then you have to buy it. So this is a very authoritarian culture. It's not true when they say it's coming from the Greek. The Greek were also very anti-democratic, but they say that the Greeks invented the democracy, which is, if you go deeper into that, it's not true. not true to the last consequences. So because in the democracy, there were no slaves anyway. So, and they treated the woman much better in the democracy. But Popper said in his book, the closed society and its enemies, said trial and error, that's the advantage of our life, of our democratic life. Trial and error. So the accident, by chance, things by chance could be a great input, we already said it, a great input in developing a new project. I don't exclude stupid things at the beginning. We work it out. When it's not good, we throw it away. But sometimes, by chance, you got a new shape or a new detail or a new organization form. That's what we are working on. We always say we don't care about the context, no matter where it is. If we can build what we think is the best for this place. Lot of examples. If you look to Baroque, the Baroque times, or if you look at the Renaissance time, they pushed away the Gothic cathedrals or remodeled it because they have self-confidence. And if a society has self-confidence, or the architect has self-confidence, he doesn't bow down to the context, he creates a new context. This is the step in the future, which we always do when we build. So as I always told my students, you have to think about 40 years in advance, or 20 years in advance. Because when it's built, you think it, then it takes 5 years to build it or 7 years to build it. Then, and if you build in reflecting the past, meaning traditional or let's say like conventional or conservative, then you are behind. When the building is finished, you're behind your times. But if you think 20 years, then you have at least 30 years. I always say, these buildings we are doing are 20 years super modern. Yeah? Then it starts to be modern. After 40 years, it's going to be a landmark. My grandmother was a teacher. And my father and all my ancestors on the father's side were builders, architects, craftsmen has to do with building. So when my friend, who is a psychoanalyst, he said, "No wonder that you are a teacher and architect, because you took the advice from your grandmother to be a teacher and advice from your father's side to be an architect. So I don't know whether I am a real architect." Because I said that a lot of our way of thinking are influenced by the method of art. And I always say the better the building is, the more it's connected to art. If you skip out the art from your architecture, it's only a building. But the art helps you to define the building in a meta level. And if you can define that, whether this is the program or the shape or the material or the way of thinking how you did it, if this doesn't touch this meta level, it stays a building. If it touches one of these levels, then it starts to be architecture. This is what I taught my students, and the other thing is that there's a beautiful quote of Saint-Exupéry, who said, if you want to build a ship, don't send the craftsman in the wood to cut the wood and build a ship, but first you have to wake up the desire for the sea. So this was my method of teaching. Actually, I was the first guy who brought to a European school the method of review the things, inviting other teachers to come to the school in order to discuss together with the student the project. In former time, before I started to do so, it was called correction. Only the professor was talking and said, "This is wrong, this is wrong, this is wrong, goodbye." Yeah. So, but by bringing in, when I started to do so, I asked the school for money. And I said, "I need money for inviting people coming from the States." And they said, hey, well, you are the teacher. So I called my friends and said, "I only can spend some money for the hotel and for the airplane. I paid it from my fee. I paid my friends." And they said, "We don't need a honorarium. We don't need to have money. We're just coming." And this was high time when they were there, because we had three days fun. And Vienna and fun. And that makes, and the projects were very good. Because they were free and we tried to liberate space. Yeah. The hardest thing for me was to give up playing guitar.
Like what's some musician?
Because I was not that good enough. Yeah. To try to play this solo of keys, never ever. My son is doing it, yeah. But the decision to do architecture or stay with music, it was clear.
And looking to the future, is there anything that you want to do?
No, I'm afraid that the profession of architects is going down. We are losing power but we get more and more responsibility, not having the power to take the responsibility. And the young architects don't check that. And so they will be eaten up by the turbo-capitalistic meaning of architecture. Meaning, you build it, I tell you how, and it should be very economic, very cheap, because I want to have more money out of this. They don't care about the cultural responsibility all the clients have to our society. They only think about their pocket. In former times, when people are visiting the cities which have beautiful architecture, because these clients were very responsible for the building. They feel that they have to give the public some good views or whatever. Of course they were thinking that money is running the world, no doubt. But they spend a lot to make architecture as the three-dimensional expression of the culture of the people. This meaning we lost everywhere. A little bit I can experience that in Russia, because the Russian government decides, after doing buildings for the Olympic and buildings for sports, they decided to build 7 cultural centers in Russia, in the main cities. So we are doing 2, one in Sevastopol and one in Siberia. Very nice projects, and they're very proud to do so.